It's a good place to start, I suppose, because this is where the railway started from.
Yeah.
Blaenau Ffestiniog. We can see all around us the cloud would lift, the massive plate tips that brought about the birth of the railway. That's what it's all for.
Yeah.
It's the gravity trains. And whizzing down from here, everybody thinks the railway starts in Port Maddox. Well, no, it really starts
in Blaenau.
up here, doesn't it? So here we are on our last film. Perhaps we should have started at this end.
Maybe we should have done and worked our way back down the other way.
Shall we start all over again?
No.
Right. Something in my mind about this place where we are. And I'm looking into the nice dry loco shed, standing out in the rain. It's on the quay. It calls it the workshop now, but we called it the engine shed because that's what it was. Part of the history of the thing, it was the engine shed. It's all been extended out that way, a massive workshop with a pit for road vehicles and all sorts of things. And underneath it all, buried, is the remains of the old turntable. Not everybody knows that.
I didn't know that.
I feel I'd like to dedicate this fifth film to Andy Putnam, because we're in the land where he worked for many years. Most of what we're looking at here is in some way his creation from a pile of rubbish that accumulated here. The dregs of the deviation, the tunnel, Project Blaenau where it finished. And he was like my man in the north, Noreng as we called it, Northern Engineering. And everything you see around here, in some way or other, he had a hand in. And I feel his ghost is around somewhere, so we've got to be a little bit careful what we say about some of the things we might look at and say.
Is he going to come and haunt you otherwise?
Well, he might. I don't know. Well, from here, it's only about, what, just over a mile and a half. Not even that, is it?
No.
What am I talking about? That's from Tanagrisha, isn't it, to Blaenau, which
mile,
was
half a mile?
Project Blaenau.
Yeah.
From 12 miles to 13 3/4. This was the place that sort of served the whole project, Blaenau, which was quite an amazing project. It was shorter than a lot of what we've done, but it was very intense. There was an awful lot of planning went into it. Massive meetings, including hundreds of people, it seemed, in a hotel in Crewe somewhere. I think we talked previously, as we came up from Tanagrisha, about the little contracts for the various groups. And this is the depot that serviced it all. It was a glorious place at one time, because before it got developed to the size it is, and with all the buildings and everything, there was not a lot here, to be honest. There was no roof on most of this. But I do remember 1974, when they were laying the track from here down to where the bridge was missing, if you remember. Yeah. Which was the show intent, so that when we said to the council we want our bridge back, there'd be tracks on both sides of it and all that. Well, again, this place serviced that. Yeah. But around the same time, I think it was 1974-ish, there was a huge slate tip, like this one that you can see up there, or you'd be able to see it if it wasn't raining and the clouds were down to here, and called the Glanadon tip. And it was removed for various reasons. I think they said they wanted to open out the space and they wanted to fill in swamps down towards Tanagrisha, where ultimately they built the playing fields and various things. Yeah. And they did it with massive, great Terexes, I think they were, big dumper trucks that had an engine on each end. Mighty great things. And they did it by building a bridge over Network Rail line, and then it came round here, and then it swept round the end of this place in making great big deep ruts in the mud, and roaring up this what we call the alleyway along behind the cottages and the King's Head and everything there, over the level crossing and around past the old station vine site, which we'll get to later if the sun shines. And then they went down to Tanagrisha, tipped it all down there and came back, and there was, I don't know, 4 or 5 of these machines flying around the circuit. And they were the type that picked up not generally slate rubbish, but more softer stuff, and it would roll into them like a Swiss roll.
Yeah.
But they couldn't do it with this stuff, so they had 2 big bulldozers that pushed behind the thing, and a massive great bucket on a 360-degree machine to top the thing. And from memory, I think it was 70 tons all up.
So just a small amount.
And then they come over the bridge and they come round here, and the back engine had no silencer on it. It's just a stump exhaust pipe sticking up. And there's a big 2-stroke thing, and they weren't meant to use it where they were close to housing for obvious reasons. But when they came round here, slithering in the mud and everything, and into this alleyway, they'd open up the back engine, and there's this 2-stroke howl, and they go thundering up here. And there was a guy on a bridge that's not there anymore, so we won't see that when we move up because it's not there. And a guy stood on the top of there with flags, and he was meant to control the empty ones coming back and the loaded ones going this way, so they didn't meet in the middle. You know?
It's always handy.
And in the middle of all that, and it can't have been 1974 now I think about it, because some way back we talked about the 1/4 mile of track materials that we took up to what used to be called Bealth Melin,
Yes.
now Llyn
Yeah.
to lay a track again to express intent from there down to the tunnel.
Yeah.
And a lot of that material came from here.
Okay.
And if you can imagine a great muddy mass round there with 12-inch deep by that wide tyre tracks where these things went screeching round there, and the entrance to it was from over there, and so the articulated truck that we were using, we had to drive into here, down there, and then back in across all these ruts.
Yeah.
And as he was coming in here with his empty, low, flat thing, and you see one of these great machines coming over the BR bridge and starting to come down with his brakes squealing, and you just had the feeling that if our trailer was in the way, because we got stuck in the mud, he would drive straight over it. Unfortunately, we never tested it, but all that had to happen with all these things tearing around.
Yeah.
And we used to come up here, sometimes go up to Walways, I think it was, in Blaenau, and get fish and chips, come back here and sit on a pile of rock and watch these things.
Thundering around.
It was great. It was really good fun. Jolly good fun.
Jolly good fun. JGF.
I think we've mentioned that before.
Probably.
Yeah. Well, there was a lot of JGF around here. This is where the 4 little simplex engines from around the tunnel and the deviation sort of ended up. Each one JGF 1, JGF 2 and so on. You know. And there was a lot of JGF around this place. It was hidden underneath everything. So from where we got to last time, we're already kind of halfway along Project Blaenau, from Tanagrisha to here. So then we got the last bit, the last ever expansive move of the Ffestiniog Railway, to complete the railway that was apparently what they set out to do in 1950, whatever, the expressed intention. And finally we got the deviation, we got up here, we got the money, got the project all planned, and from our department, from the permanent way side of it, everything was geared up so that after Christmas 1981, we would start, well, on 1st of January really, 1982, we would start laying the track from here upwards. Everything was planned, all the materials are up here, pre-drilled sleepers, mountains of them, everything, the rails, the train of rails, all up here. Then it snowed.
Yes, I think I have seen the pictures of that when you're trying to sort things out in sort of yay deep in snow.
Yeah, well, that was JGF, dare I say it.
Yeah.
And for years we'd had on January the 1st, I think it was, the first weekend into the new year, whenever that fell, that weekend on the Saturday night became a tradition from way back, 1960 something I think it was, and it had developed into a major thing. We'd go for a big dinner, one time in the Blue Anchor, as it used to be in Portmaddock, and then 1 or 2 other places. Brynsleden, near Penryn, was the place we went for years. And the the big weekend after 1st of January where we should have had these 2 big groups and a lot of other people all geared up to come here to build the railway, the last bit. And it snowed, and I can't remember, less than half the people who were all booked to come to the dinner, which would be the kind of the last dinner on the way to Blaenau, if you like.
Yeah.
And they couldn't get here. And so we had a dinner, but it was a bit of a low affair because a lot of the main players couldn't get here. Even the company's lorry, which was bringing us material, something to do with the project, his fuel froze up on the North Coast Road somewhere, and and here we were. So within weeks of finishing the job, and everything had gone pear-shaped, and
everything was frozen solid.
We were stuck, but it was a good laugh. And anyway, so it's from here then that we serviced building that last bit to Blaenau. We'd already bought masses of materials up here. We built the 2 turnouts for each end of the loop. I mean, there's more there now, but the original thing, what I was told to do by the chief executive of the time, Dick Wallen, which was, I've often thought it was one of the few times I actually was told to do something.
And you did it?
Because I thought, right from the day I started here, well, it's kind of obvious what we've got to do, isn't it? And I remember saying on one of the big walkabouts when we were planning this thing, saying to Dickie Wallen, I wasn't really interested in going to Blaenau. I've got enough railway to Tanagrisha. And he turned to me and he said, and he was South Welsh, and he said, "You better start now then, laddie." And I thought, oh, that's my instruction, build a railway. So we built these 2 turnouts, like what had become our standard ones then, the £75 standard gauge ones from MOD places that we'd re-gauged, altered geometry. And we built them at Minford over a period for an hour or 2 when we got back, or a wet day or whatever, until eventually they were ready to come. And so they came up on the company's lorry at the time, which had a big flatbed. And we were a little bit naughty because we thought, how are we going to actually get them onto the track to drag them up to Blaenau? We thought, oh, it's simple, isn't it? We can drive onto the level crossing just round the corner on a Sunday. Nothing happens on a Sunday in Wales, you know? And we've got the crane, the big red crane, the fire engine, Esmeralda it was called. And it came up here, we got everything set up, the lorry on the thing, and we'd forgotten that there were buses on a Sunday, because there was a bit of... It didn't take us long to lift them off, that's how we planned it. Thought it would only take a few minutes, wasn't it? But it excited the Gwynedd County Council guys, who we were on good terms with then, fortunately. And one of them turned up and he said, he didn't come all formal like it has come to my notice or anything. He took me one side and Freddie, could we have a word? And he says, I hear you were blocking the road on Sundays and the bus had to go round, or whatever it was. He said, oh, yeah. It was only for a minute, And so he said, well, put it the other way round then. He says, if we came and put all our road machinery on your railway line just for a few minutes, you wouldn't be very happy, would you?
Yeah.
I said, yeah, okay, fair comment. But so now we got these 2 things, 44 feet long, weighed 4 tons. You may have come across, I don't think we've probably mentioned it anywhere in this series of things, a little engine called Britomart. Yes. A little Hunslet quarry engine that some of the guys at Boston Lodge had bought and overhauled it. And one day, way back in the early 1970s, and they made some rollers so it could sit on the lorry as it was towed around with its wheels going around, chuff, 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 and little kids in the little carriages and everything. Health and safety hadn't been thought of then, had it really? It was pre-1974, I think.
True, that's right then.
And so these rollers were great, they were massive, strong things, well engineered, so that the engine's little wheels would sit between 2 rollers on this thing that would screw down to a bed. Yeah. And so And we scratched our head about how we were going to move these, or we were going to lift them up. Or the crane put them straight on the wagon and everything. And then we suddenly thought, Britain art rollers,
Yeah.
upside down,
Yeah.
like scooters.
Yeah.
So we screwed them to sleepers, put them on the track, put these two things on them, and then pushed them up, towed them up, pushed them up. One of them before the snow really set in, and another one after the snow, if I remember right. And it worked beautifully. So that's how we got those things, all part of the kit up there.
So this is one of the JGF locomotives, or part of?
Well, I think it's probably bits of maybe even all four of them. Because just behind me here is another frame of another one.
Okay.
That's probably contributed bits. There was one of them, can't remember which, was it Sandra, I think it was, because they all had names at one time, was converted into a winch for the Kaimar job, and we taking all the materials down on the incline that old Andy built. And so he converted one of these engines with bits of a tumble dryer and a pedestrian roller, I think it was, something such, to make this winch. And as you can see, it's got the name Andy.
Yeah.
There was a lot of discussion what we were going to call it, whether it was going to be Putty or various things that he got called. And it seems they've gone for what I think is just right, Andy.
Very fitting.
It's a nice looking machine. It's kind of nothing like really how they were when they were being used all the time. They were all grubby little things. One of them had a wooden cab and it rolled upside down one day and rather crushed it. Another one didn't. I think two of them didn't have a cab at all. One of them had a cab so narrow you had to go backwards into it. And when you got out, if your pocket caught the little thing on the brake handle and pulled it up, the brake would fly off. And if you didn't realise that, as you got off, it rolled off down the hill.
You had to run after it.
Yeah, well, it never really escaped, did it? We weren't that stupid, were we? Yeah, they're interesting little engines. These, everybody knows all about the steam engines, the passenger diesels, the works engines, ENA. Used to be our department and engine, which when we were working up this part of the world, we could keep our whole P-way train in here quite secure, bring the engine in here. Interesting little thing on ENA Harlech Castle. On the top of the exhaust pipe, like a lot of them had, there was a little flapper that would shut to keep the rain out, and then it would open. Well, it would come in here because the exhaust pipe like that and the flapper was that way. So as it was going flap, 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 it would come in under the roller shutter there and just miss it. Going out, we had to come out with the engine idling. And one day, a guy called Malcolm, who used to work with me years ago, and I don't know whether he was in a hurry or what, but he started it up, revved the engine, roared out, because the flapper went up like that and caught on the thing and ripped the top off the thing. Shouldn't laugh about it really, should we?
Never good.
But yeah, these are all the funny little things, like there's no brake on that thing. Come back to these things, which the majority of people who know all about the Ffestiniog Railway probably wouldn't know much about these. I don't know where they came from originally. Probably worked in things around Bedfordshire, maybe in the sand pits or the industrial railways, you know. Colonel Campbell, who we've not met but talked about previously.
Campbell's platform.
Yeah, he owned initially two of them, and one of them was called Colonel for a long time, and was the other one? One was called Jane, another Sandra. And which two the Colonel had, I'm really not sure. But he used to use them to drive from Campbell's platform to Tannaball, then take his overalls off with his shitty suit underneath it, and he'd drive down to Dolgelly then, where he worked as the chief legal something or other. And gradually we inherited the things, and we had the four of them. They used to run on the tunnel job with two of them coupled together to move the big concrete torpedo car, and latterly the massive great truck mixer thing that Andy built on a big flat wagon, and it needed the two of them for the brake power going downhill. Permanent way department, one winter we used Colonel, I think it was, for the whole of our winter relaying works, because all the engines, like Molwyn and dare I mention it, Marianne, and probably Molhebog, they were all not serviceable for one winter for various reasons. So we used this one little diesel which had no roof on it. Amazing little thing, 2 cylinders, 20 horsepower maybe. No doubt people watching this will say, oh no, it was a such and such, and it had 25 horsepower. Well, what the hell. It would pull trains with 37 of our standard 36-foot, 75-pound rails on. But the driver had to hold the fuel rack control out all the time, because it would try and shut itself down. And then the exhaust pipe would glow. And at the end of the winter, we were accused of wrecking it.
Wonder why?
We said we didn't wreck it, we used it, because we hadn't got another engine. The show has to go on. Right, this was never a shed in the old company's days. It's, as you can see, it's been built over and on the side of the old loco shed. It's part of the development here. Most of the building of it was done, if I remember right, by Evesham High School, I think, and perhaps one or two other sort of groups. Used to have a lot of groups used to come and work up around here, just building up this thing under Andy's direction. And it was built, all the block work. There's these, can't think now, the original temporary doors, I think, were built of oil drums flattened out and riveted together. We did
inventive
most things on the cheap. We were kind of forced into it because they had to have the money to run the trains and all that sort of thing, so we tended to get what was left over. And so we effectively built the railway on the cheap by trawling the second-hand markets for rails and to some extent sleepers and a lot of fastenings and all sorts, which was probably right for the time. But it's, we're coming to a point now where it's beginning to cost a bit, because some of these cheap things that we picked up have come to the end of their life. And so now they're costing a bit of money, but then of course you can do it now. It seems you can afford new materials, which, as long as they're looked after in the early stages of their life, they should get, well, I don't know, remember the story of the jarras that were going to last 60 years, and after 30 years they were starting to go soft. So we're now on to plastic sleepers, and they're going to last forever, except remember the jarras. We shall see. So this bit was built up, like I said, over a period of years as the whole thing developed. Unfortunately, a lot of the work we did up in this part of the world wasn't with the benefit of this great big covered shed and everything, because the roof didn't get done until after we'd got to Blaenau. And as you can see outside, it rains up here. It's got a track in it. We worked out alignments for the tracks outside with great difficulty so that we could get things, even the steam engine Taliesin could get in here. Only just with the minimum radius we managed to get out there. At one time we serviced all our departmental wagons, all the RAFs, all that sort of thing, up in here. Now, as you can see, there's skip frames, various bits and pieces, wheel sets, all the kit for maintaining these things, because it's good to have a few of these things, like the tipping tub behind. You never know when you might need a few of them.
Exactly.
And if when you come to need them, they're all rusted away and whatnot. So the whole process needs to continue. You can see around you a great stock of materials. A lot of it we collected, or rather Andy collected, from wherever there was an opportunity to accumulate things, we accumulated them because you never knew what you might need one day. Oh, we can stop in this bridge for a little while.
Out, getting the dry sort of for a little bit at least.
You can see this is, if you look that way, it's visible rain.
Yeah, it's driving well.
We used to have a lot of discussions, particularly in the winter when we were out on the track, and we got our mess van there, and you could hear the rain on the roof.
Yeah.
And it was audible rain. And quite often all it was dripping off the trees. But everybody would start saying, oh, we can't go out yet, we can't go, we can hear the rain. You know, I said, I'll go and move the train then where there's no trees.
Yes.
And then you won't be able to, oh no, it's all right, we're going.
I mean, this is quite handy for us, because obviously we've got one big bridge here, but it's got two sections. So it almost looks like there should have been a second track running through this bit as well as that bit.
Correct. Yes, well spotted. Well, you recall when we came past Gwnaethpwyd, and all around down the Gwnaethpwyd end there's tracks and cuttings into the slate tips and everything. There was this great plan to have it's going to be a shuttle train, great and glorious ideas, but effectively a second line along here, all the way from the station, down here, over the level crossing where we already put the rails through, which a lot of people have questioned over the years. What do you put those there for? There's no trains running on it, is there? And then it would have gone where the sidings are now, and then a river bridge, and then through a cutting that was left in where they tipped tons of slate from the slate tip I was telling you about, and then up the old Dinas branch to the bottom of the inclines to the quarries, or the mines to be more correct. And there's even an idea of a triangular junction down there, so that the shuttle train would have gone from here to Dinas, the old Dinas, not to be confused with the one near Carnarvon, of course. And then down the other side of the triangle to Tanagrisha, where there would have been a little siding for it to hop in while two trains passed it, and then back up to here. But it never actually got off the ground. It was one of these wonderful ideas, and we had great stacks of rail and everything waiting to do it. It's all got used somewhere, I'm sure.
And instead we're just going to use the bridge as a bit of shelter.
Because this was all, that's not really what they were here for.
But it's handy.
Because this was all being made new as part of this glorious scheme, rather than the original idea was, as we come through the Wakefield crossing there, of carrying on, turning round to the right, hard round, and then down there, what they called the 7-acre site, was going to be a grand terminus with several platforms and station buildings and car parks and everything, which had been a glorious place for it. But then the idea came of having a joint station in the town rather than right on the periphery. Quite who it was, old Mr. Garraway would have claimed credit for it, and I'm sure he was a big driver in it. So if you imagine this was the old Ffestiniog route, a little bit to that side, and then it went up, where we get a bit further round, we'll see, so we can see up the cutting towards Blaenau, we'll see where it went. So, and around the same time, this new road was coming up from, to do with Ffestiniog power station probably, and if you look at maps of how it's used to be, with fairly narrow roads around, and then this great big new road comes sweeping up, and then with this scheme that was drawn up, this road across here and another one a bit further around the corner were all built new on new alignments, along with the railway and the cuttings, and so facility was built into it to have the two tracks if it ever actually came up, because if it wasn't done, if they hadn't done that and then they decided to do it, can we have another bridge? And they say no. Because it'd be a lot of railways, like your railways, they're single line, they always have been, but the earthworks were done for two tracks, even twin tunnels in some places, and they never used them, but they're still there. So that's the same with this, you know. So the January relaying up here, not relaying really, was it? laying new because it's on a different route. The old route's a bit further there. This progressed in a remarkably quick time. We got up to, I'm not sure quite where, I think just round the corner here somewhere. And the next day we came up, struggled up in the snow, and when we got here, the rails were sitting on the sleepers. We'd put the screws and the clips on the sleepers all ready to put it all together, and we couldn't find them. Trying to find the track, and of course as you walk along you'd end up kicking the screws off and they'd drop another 5 inches, disappear under the snow. So we persevered, and eventually, after a very short period, I have a feeling it was around the 11th of January or something, we actually got to Blaenau Station. There's a very bare track, no ballast or anything, so that we could actually get a train up there, which we thought was a pretty tremendous achievement in the time with the weather. But as we'd said earlier, the big January weekend was always the Lancs and Cheshire and the Dear Mersey groups combined with whoever else was around. Yeah. And we'd have maybe 30 or so people on the site. And so it would go pretty fast. Yeah. Given that it was new Jarrah sleepers, all pre-drilled, jig drilled, all the fastenings laid out, and the rails, what had become in those days standard 36-foot, 75-pound rails. Yeah. And this is the only curve other than Wakefield back there that we had to get round, and they'd take it quite, it was within the flexibility of the things. Any sharper than this would really ought to crow them, yeah, if you want it to last maintenance free. Which that one didn't, because we didn't crow it. Yeah.
Right then, we'll make our way around to the next bridge.
Carry on.
Into the wonders of the weather of North Wales.
It's one of the joys of Blaenau Ffestiniog is the rain. You can study the rain. There's so many different sorts of rain. There ahead of us is, since 1950, whatever it was, what the railway set out to do, to rebuild the railway to Blaenau Ffestiniog. What we see before us, of course, is somewhat different than what you would have seen prior to, I think it was 1959, or around then, because there would have been, where the standard gauge is on the left of the cut in there, yeah, would have been the two tracks of the old FR line, one of which sent a branch roughly where the standard gauge goes now, yeah, to the northwestern yard where there's all the interchange sidings, and the little quarry train used to run down there from the quarry, I think on a separate track probably to, in the latter years of the passenger trains. And there was no BR line visible from here. Yeah. We couldn't have been here anyway because this bridge wasn't here prior to 1950, whatever. And the Great Western Station, which you can see more or less in the distance, yeah, it would be the terminus from the line from Bala. Yeah. And then the Northwestern down here, this connection was put through, and as it came round here, it veered across to the right-hand side of the cutting. By, well, before that, by the time it came to that footbridge, it was well over here. Yeah. But the old FR main line then was cut, and the track laid through to connect, so they could get the nuclear waste trains, yeah, to and from Charles-Fynydd, yeah, which were going down to Llandudno Junction and then off to Windscale or Sellafield, yeah, or whatever they called it then. And so at that time, there was no way that the FR could ever reach its old terminus because by now Big Brother was in the way. Yeah. And then when this great scheme for a new central station came up, and no doubt lots of people sat around big sheets of paper and doodled and schemed, and what we see in front of us now is a result of all that scheming, which is the existing BR track slewed right across this, relayed as well, because it was old shared track on rotten sleepers and everything, probably recovered from various places perhaps. So it was realigned and relayed hard over to that side. This whole route through here was built with these bridges for the roads, and in case of the one back there, the new main road up to the roundabout. And that allowed then the FR track, or tracks if we ever got round to it, to then go up. And some wouldn't believe you could ever have another track in the middle of there, because Network Rail, they had a bit of a problem with the concept that these two tracks could be as close together to the minimum
clearance
between the respective bubbles, which is how it was designed. And they had difficulty with that. And one of their guys said, in one of our discussions, he said that their engineer would want a fence, and he would want it 15 feet from their nearest rail.
Yeah.
If you imagine out there. So I said to him, which caused a few raised eyebrows, well, I want a fence 15 feet from my nearest rail. So you put yours in the middle of my track, and I'll put mine in the middle of your track. And there was a lot of, how dare he say such things?
Yes,
But I'd said it by then anyway, so it just came out. But it seemed to be the right thing to say, because it stopped a silly discussion going sillier and getting nowhere.
Yeah,
fine. So what we see there, Dorville Bridge, which at one time was a road bridge, that got rebuilt into a footbridge when the BR track was brought through, because it had to be raised. Talking of raising bridges, you'll see when we get up actually into the new station, there's a footbridge that comes down from the town onto the platform, and you might look at it and think, that's rather high, isn't it? Well, apparently it had to be that height in case of future electrification.
I can agree with that.
Through Blaenau Tunnel. So it was around here that we were laying the track in the snow. But it was definitely jolly good fun. It was probably some of the best jolly good fun we ever had, really, because we were really into top gear by now, and we were going for it. You could see there's the end of jobs, so we'd be steaming up here. And of course, the two turnouts on their Britomart rollers upside down at separate times, as we got the track up to just beyond the thing that looks like a signal box. Then we bought the up-facing ones in and rolled them into place, and then the second ones came up when we got the track to the far end. And they all worked beautifully. And lots of doomsayers and whatnot said, oh, it won't work, the little rollers are too small, they'll fall off, blah, 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 but they didn't. You can see the narrowness of the site, can't you?
Yeah, very much so.
You know, the station having been moved up here rather than what at one time was going to be the 7-acre site.
Yeah.
Which would have been like a massive, great, highly visible thing with car parks and everything. So we're squeezed between the back of the houses here and what was the old Great Western Yard here, which they built a school on, which frankly could have been anywhere.
Yeah.
So this is what we got.
Small area of play to work with.
As we've already talked about on the way up, how the British Railways, as it was then in 1950, whatever, the connection was put through, because this was the Great Western station here on a sort of angle, with the old FR lines going where the Network Rail lines are now, and under the old Queen's Bridge and up to the quarry inclines. And the connection that was put through to link what had been the North Western to the Great Western, after it had closed, to bring out nuclear waste from Charles Fyny. When that was put through, it severed the Ffestiniog's main line, because it came from that side of it to this side and straight up through the middle of the Great Western site. So, but even though it cut off the old Ffestiniog main line through to Portmannock, you could argue that Ffestiniog never closed, because its tracks were used from the quarries all the way down through here and down through the connection that had always been there into the northwestern yard. So they were still running on there.
Yeah.
I don't know quite when, but by that time that stopped, they'd started rebuilding from Port Maddox. So you could genuinely say that Ffestiniog Railway never closed.
Well, there you go.
Contrary to what a lot of people say, how it was reborn and everything. So when all this was done, everything was done for British Railways or Rail Track, whatever at the time. Well, it's 1982, whoever it was. They got the site, they got the tracks, they got the platform and everything because they already had a station. So they'd only come up here if, I suppose, somebody else set it up for them. Whereas we came up here and we found a muddy bank, which is eventually this, and a canal.
Yes, you do.
And the school wall, and we had to kind of try and fit the whole thing in. I suppose 2 carriages constitutes a train.
It does. It's in Lincolnshire.
See, I told you it would be 150.
It's a little bit sad.
See the bob weights and the couplings, they're all got chains.
Yeah.
That's because when it pulls the eccentrics on them, if one's a bit higher than the other, the bob weight flies up and it hits the bottom of the fall plate with a hell of a clang.
Yeah.
Now this used to happen in Garner's Tunnel when it went through the dip, through the arches, and the couplings would pull and get above the eccentric. This thing would fly up, a mighty clang on the fall plate, and somebody would say, "A rock's fallen on the roof." And we get sent up here to think the tunnel's falling down, and every time it was this bob weight clanging on the thing because it had broken its chain or somebody hadn't coupled it together or whatever. Well, I remember we were talking on the way up about the Dinas branch and where we saw in the level crossing that piece of track that goes nowhere and the bridges with an extra portal and everything. Well, the scheme, the thinking at the time was to have a shuttle train from here that went to the quarry, and that would have used that track.
Yeah.
But when we were building the railway up to here, I was working on the basis, like I said before, is just repeat Tanagrisha. And so my intention was to, ultimately, when we got a platform, which we didn't have to start with, we'd have a track either side of it.
Yeah.
And there was discussion about which one, would the train come in on that one or this one, or the engine will run round and all that. And then people started saying, no, that's not what we want. We want one on this side with an engine run round over there. Whether they were scared of running alongside the Network Rail line or what, I don't know. So the whole thing had to change, and we laid these 2, and there wasn't one there for many years. Ultimately, that got laid, like it would have done if the scheme for the Dinas thing had ever gone ahead.
Scheme.
But it got laid and it was connected in each end. For a period, we had point control from a panel, and so passenger trains could use this line, but I think the use of it was, over the years, so little it probably didn't justify the cost of maintaining the turnouts and the associated detection and whatnot. So that was removed, and it's become a line primarily accessed from the other end, like a siding, and it's used for things like, I don't know, Lilla, Britomart, various other little engines.
Special days and
that are up here.
galas.
Yeah, and they chop up and down here, and they give the kiddies, both big and small, give them a ride ride on the engines and let them blow the whistle. Well, this all looks hugely different to the day we actually got the track laid, plain track, and we got the bottom points and everything, to the point where I think it was the 11th of January, and there was a lot of snow around here, and we got one of our little simplexes up here actually into the station, and I remember phoning some hotel in London where the board were having a board meeting, and Mr. Ralphie, Ernest John Ralphie, called in amongst other things, who's the chairman, and I phoned him when we got here and told him that he's now the chairman of a railway that goes to Blaenau Ffestiniog. And he said, oh, super, as they do. And I thought, well, he had to do that really, didn't he? And you look around and everything's covered with snow, and then a pair of diesels, 25s maybe, with a snowplow on each end, came through because the nuclear waste trains were still running. And it had been ploughing with a plough on both ends, covered in snow, and here we were with our little simplex that ploughed through the same snow as they did with their mighty great thing. It was quite a moment actually when we actually got here, in the snow, but there's a hell of a lot to do, all the track lay and everything. But I mean, track is track, and laying track, you know, every bit is slightly different fastenings, different people and everything, but broadly we've talked all the way up about laying track, so let's just jump ahead a little bit to when pretty well everything was laid, and I think it was March the 22nd, VR were having their opening day with their first train and their speeches, and was that the occasion when Lord Tony Pandy came up here even? Maybe. Or was that sometime he came up anyway, but there were so many things happened in those last few weeks, you know, that frankly, without looking through diaries and all that, I can't remember it all. But certainly March the 22nd, it just happened by sheer coincidence that we brought a huge train up from Minford with Blanche. There was rails for the Gwnaethpwyd sidings, all sorts of materials, and the components in one little RAF wagon for the buffers right up at the far end at whatever it is, 13 miles, 54 and a half chains or something like that. And so we got to Gwnaethpwyd, I think we had Molwyn as well, and we shunted the whole thing, most of it went into the yard, and then we set off from there with Blanche and the wagon with the buffer bits and number one van, 51 as it became. And we came chuffing up here, went up there, looked at the site and worked out what we were going to do, and then kind of said it was a coincidence, but we actually knew already that it was BR's grand opening day. And so the plot that we hatched was that we'd back off with our little train, go and hide in the bridge back down there, and when somebody gave us away that the BR opening train was coming wiggling round bends here, our little train could come thundering out the tunnel and race it up here, which it did beautifully, and the BR driver played along with the game and he saw it, so he slowed down so that little Blanche could keep up with it. And there was loads of us sort of up on the bridge, I think there were, and there was our little engine coming up, and here was the BR opening train, rail cars I think, and the guy, a news guy was up there, and we saw it on the news in the evening, and as the two trains came up, and of course they get closer, he had to follow one or the other, so he followed ours for a little bit, and then he probably remembered who was paying him, and it switched across that one. But by the time we came back up again, there was people all over the place, and all the school kids were all sitting along the walls waving flags and cheering and everything. And I think we rather outshone their day, which is a bit unfair really, but you had to do it.
Yeah, it had to be
You
done.
just had to do it. Of course, we had to have what a lot of people call jollies around these momentous occasions. Apart from all the formal festivities and everything, somewhere in amongst all these amazing train things, we had a celebratory dinner for all us lot, rather than the operators, the railway builders in Brinshead End, which was a quite enjoyable evening. And I am told that when we came out of there, and this is in the days when everybody drove their cars to everywhere, and I am told that somebody who came with me in my car vowed never to go in my car again. I don't know why. And then after the grand opening, a few days after, I think we just wanted to make sure everything bedded in, that there was nothing ripping footballs off or unstable track or everything. And so I took all my track gang, which I think was about 8 of us in those days, to the King's Head in Glanford. Thought we'll go there for lunch. And they all thought this was a good idea. They didn't usually argue with me, particularly when I came up to things like that. So off we went to there, and sometime afterwards in the afternoon, and it was a very hot sunny day, I remember, but that, to be honest, is about all I remember of it, because we walked up through the town to come up to here to catch a train to go back to Minford, and I honestly don't remember anything about walking, because I think I'd had a couple of ciders then.
A couple of ciders too many.
I very seldom drink alcohol anyway, with the heat and the jollity of the moment, blah, blah, blah. And somehow we got back here. I remember we all got in the guard's van of the train, and a guard who I don't think enough time has elapsed to mention his name, he more or less told us, "You scrappy lot can't come on my train." And I remember, I think, pushing him into the corner a bit and saying, "We built a bloody railway, mate."
Yeah.
And that, frankly, is about the story of Blaenau Ffestiniog.
And the railway.
Yeah. So the question then, of course, comes what happens next. And from 1982, all the effort and the pressure and everything geared up in top gear to do this and to finish it on time, which we did, and within budget as well, my part of it anyway.
Yeah.
And then suddenly, I'd kind of seen it coming, but there was a big anticlimax.
Yeah.
We'd done this, the first act, everything, opening day, meals, and then the thing about what we do now. And then it started to dawn on me, well, all we've really achieved, my department, frankly, was make the railway longer, and there's more of it to maintain forevermore, which is why we were here.
Yeah.
And so I suppose we set about, we had to draw up, revise the track patrolling programmes, maintenance programmes and everything for a railway that now, okay, it had only gone another 1.5 miles, but it almost, there's quantum leaps in there, and you can go up to a certain point and not a lot changes. And Tanagrisha, I think, was that certain point, but going beyond there, the train service pattern changed. It's only a little bit longer, but a lot of things had to change, including our way of maintaining the railway.
Yeah.
And I think the fact that it's still here
And still running.
probably shows we got it right.